Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Daily Bullet, the Second Amendment Foundation's daily video series where we introduce you and talk with people that are making a difference in the Second Amendment arena. Joining us today, Dr. John Edeen, a good friend of mine, and the Director of Outreach for Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. Dr. Edeen, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Happy to be with you guys.
So let's get started. For somebody who may be just stumbling into this gun rights thing, maybe just finding this video, what is DRGO and how did it get started?
Well, DRGO stands for Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, and it was founded in 1994 by Dr. Timothy Wheeler. He's an ENT surgeon in California who has since retired. But back in those days, he realized that there was a significant bias against the Second Amendment amongst medical practitioners in California and frankly, across establishment medicine. So the AMA and the American College of Surgeons, maybe even American Academy of Pediatrics, American Psychiatric Association, all these big doctor groups were anti-2A. And then there was the issue with the CDC doing bias research. They were doing advocacy research. So in 1996, he and several other DRGO members and some other folks that were in the 2A field testified in front of a congressional committee and got the CDC defunded for doing bias advocacy research. Now, notice I didn't say gun violence research, because that's never been defunded. But what was defunded was the advocacy research. In other words, we want our research to turn out this way, so let's fudge our numbers and do whatever tricks we have to do in order to make the conclusion come out what we want, which is anti-Second Amendment. And so by their own words, they pretty much hung themselves up. And so the Dickey Amendment was passed and still in effect, actually, to this day. So in 1996, the Dickey Amendment was passed. So the bias advocacy research has been defunded. And it still should be that way forever, because there's no place for government money in bias advocacy research. So that's where DRGO got started.
Okay. So started in the middle 90s, and it has, to start with, full disclosure, DRGO, I think it was 6-7 years ago, became part of the Second Amendment Foundation, right? Yeah,
it may not have been that long, but it was originally part of the Claremont Institute. And then later on, the Second Amendment Foundation, it became under their umbrella. It's kind of like what JPFO is like. Same kind of thing. JPFO and DRGO, we're under that Second Amendment Foundation umbrella, but we're independent. I mean, they help us out with certain things, but really we're an independent organization. They don't tell us what we have to write about and all that kind of stuff, and we can talk about what we write about. I think that's an important thing. So we have a website, drgo.us. Mm-hmm. And we also do a blog twice a week. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, a blog post comes out. One of our writers, and of course I've done some writing, but there's a lot of other people who do writing. We have people in all fields of medicine, psychiatry and internal medicine, surgery, trauma. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I do children's orthopedics. And my area of interest is gun-free zones in hospitals, because that's how I got started with this in about probably 2013 or so. I realized that every time I walked into a hospital, I had to disarm myself, and that the Texas 30-06 signs did absolutely nothing to protect me or my patients or my colleagues from, say, a spree shooter or mass public shooting or even terrorism. And I've written extensively about that, and you can find all that stuff on drgo.us. But we talk about all kinds of other things. When the Hearing Protection Act was coming out, and it was in front of Congress, we actually published a white paper explaining why the suppressors are such a good thing and why they're actually better than anything else. And it wasn't just regular doctors writing this. It was actually 4 ear, nose, and throat surgeons, 2 of which were called neuro-otologists, which basically deal with sensory neural hearing loss. Yeah, let's say that 3 times fast.
Sure.
Yeah. So anyway, so these guys actually wrote. They talked about the actual from a scientific basis, and then how suppressors actually decrease not only from the shooter's side, but also anybody in the vicinity. If you're wearing earmuffs like I'm wearing, hearing protection, right? We have electronic earmuffs, and we have just the passive ones, and they may drop the noise signature by 20 to 30 decibels. Mm-hmm. But a suppressor catches everybody. Anybody who's in the area, the suppressor will work for. Whereas if you're not wearing hearing protection, and Paul, how many times have you shouldered a rifle and bumped your hearing protection off, and next thing you know, your ears are ringing? I did an Appleseed. I was teaching an Appleseed, and that happened to me. And I was deaf for a couple of days in one ear. In fact, mm-hmm. my hearing still is not right. You get permanent hearing loss. That's the other thing. If you get exposure above 120 decibels, that causes permanent hearing loss. There's nothing you can do to recover that because it damages the little hair cells. And so it's very important that we all protect our hearing. And so there's this paper that's there. Okay. We also talk about, what do you do when your doctor asks you if you own a gun? There's a lot of good information about that. We talk about something called a boundary violation. If they're pushing a political agenda, and it's not necessarily to your benefit, because if they tell you, oh yeah, you should either get rid of your guns or store them separately from the ammo and take them apart, and when somebody breaks into your house and you can't defend yourself, that's not in your best interest, is it?
Right.
But the doctors are telling people to do stuff like that, and they have no credentials. They have no education or training. They're just listening to what the American Academy of Pediatrics or the AMA tells them to do. But those guys aren't experts in self-defense. When you look at public health, the public health people are way against firearms ownership and firearms use, but they don't take into account defensive uses by the normal person. They only look at the cost of criminal activity and people being shot, murdered. Look at Chicago. Mm-hmm. They look at that, but they don't look at the number of people who defend themselves every year. And you and I both know that number can be up to 2.5 million times a year. And that they ignore that research. They only look at the stuff that it kind of reinforces their preconceived notions. They only look at the cost. They don't look at the benefit. And so these are the kind of things that DRGO has been fighting. And so when we see stuff that's put out in some of the medical journals, we will debunk it. We will explain why it's bad. And that's what our blog does twice a week. We also have a Facebook page, and there's a lot of exchange on that as well. And we'll post articles from elsewhere, and then people will comment. And so there's a lot of free exchange of ideas.
One thing I want to get to, and this is something that's been going for a while, but I really want to highlight it because I think it's something important that DRGO does. If you are in, it doesn't matter where you are, if you're looking for a physician and you don't want the question to come up, do you have any guns? Or you don't want it to be an issue. If you are looking for an ear, nose, and throat doctor, you don't want it to be an issue whether you own guns or not. There is a way to match up people who are looking for Second Amendment friendly medical staff and those medical staff that are looking for patients. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Sure, yeah. We have a website called 2adoc.com. It's the number 2, the letter A, DOC as in doctor.com. And it's a matching service for patients and physicians so you can find a 2A friendly provider for your whatever thing you're looking for. It's still kind of in its infancy. It's been going on for a little over a year, I would say. And unfortunately, we have a lot more demand for, of patients than we have doctors and other practitioners who have signed up. But, the nice thing about it is it's not a searchable database. So if you are a healthcare provider and you want to sign up, it's a referral service that doesn't cost you anything, and you get good quality patients. Look at all the people in the 2A community; they're good folks, and so we really need people to sign up. It is not a searchable database, so the bad guys can't look at it and say, "Oh, look, Dr. So-and-so, he's a 2A guy. Let's go ahead and picket his office because we don't like those people." You don't want to be outed. In the same way, people who are looking for 2A friendly doctors, they can't be searched either. We match them up, and then we'll send you an email that says these are the doctors in the specific, say 25 miles or 50, whatever you request. In this specialty, that's a 2A friendly doctor, and we try to match things up. But it's safe and it's free. That's the other thing. It doesn't cost anybody anything. It's kind of a pet project of our director, Dr. I can't even pronounce his name because he's Polish, and it's Przebinda. He pronounces it like Spinga. But anyway, so he's the one that kind of has honchoed that. I'm the membership director, so my job is membership. And so if you are a healthcare provider, or even if you're not one, we would ask you to go ahead and look at DRGO and join. The cost is like $35 a year, and there are some benefits to being in DRGO, although one of them just went away because we just got an email from USCCA that says that they're not honoring any of those relationships anymore. So that's one thing that that just went away, but it's a good organization, and it's tax deductible too. So it's because we're an educational organization. Our job is really education. We're trying to educate people about the Second Amendment and the benefits of firearms ownership and safe use of firearms, versus what the other side would tell you, that everybody's out killing people with their guns, and assault weapons are there to kill millions of people, and that's just not true.
Absolutely. Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left of the time we have for today. But briefly, if you could, I want to touch back on gun-free zones. And I've never yet seen a hospital that has hard entries. I've never yet seen a hospital that has metal detectors and security at every entrance. If you go into a hospital that's a gun-free zone, you're really putting your trust in a piece of paper.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a magic talisman, right? It's you're thinking, it's magical thinking that you think that piece of paper or piece of plastic or cardboard at the front door of the hospital is going to protect you. And as I like to say, the gun-free zone signs work right up until they don't. And the last thing that I want to do is I don't want to see my colleagues and my patients being slaughtered by some psychopath or by a bunch of terrorists. And we know from looking at the history of terrorism against hospitals, this is a real thing. Not very much in the United States, but around in the Middle East especially, hospitals have become targeted, especially in places like Afghanistan and in Syria. Of course, there have been hospitals targeted in Russia back in the mid-90s during the Chechen revolts. They targeted a hospital in a place called Budanovsk and took over 1,000 people hostage. And they actually held Russia hostage for about 4 days until they were able to actually get concessions from the Russian government. And then they were able to escape back to Chechnya. Surprise. They all made it back. And so this is a real thing. There was a guy in the United States who the FBI fortunately got wind of, who was going to bomb a hospital in Kansas, I think it was, this year. But they had he was trying to figure out how to make bombs, and the guy that he was talking to was an FBI informant. So he told the FBI and the FBI confronted the guy, and they were in a shootout, and the guy committed suicide. So there was a hospital bombing that was going to happen in the United States this year. Fortunately, It didn't happen, but so these are things that are out there, and nobody hears about it unless you really go looking for it. So this is why I think gun-free zones are a bad thing. We need to be able to protect ourselves, and we need to be able to protect the people that we are responsible for. And it's a moral issue as far as I'm concerned. As a physician, it's part of my job to take care of people, not only my patients, but their families and my colleagues, and to be there, to do what needs to be done. And the attorneys will tell the hospitals, oh, you're fine. All you need is that sign and you're covered. Well, guess what? Sooner or later, when this happens, there's going to be a $1 billion lawsuit against the hospital corporation, and then they're going to change their tune. But until something like that happens, they're not going to open their, they're not going to change their tune. I've been at this now for about 7 years, and we've been running into that problem. It's the corporate mindset.
Yep. Well, we are just about out of time. Before we go, though, if I could, one more time, let everybody know how they can find out more about DRGO and become a member.
Sure. DRGO.us is our main website, and there you can find a lot of information, not just the membership stuff, but there's all of our old blogs, and plus there's a lot of like white papers on different subjects that may be of use to you. We touched on a couple, but there's a lot more than that. There's like an article on the history of the DRGO and how it got started. I think that's very interesting. And then we have twaydoc.com, which is the matching service, and we need both doctors, healthcare providers, and also patients. And it's free and it's not searchable, so it's safe. You're not going to get doxxed by the left. Let's put it that way.
Very cool. Well, Dr. Edeen, thank you so much for joining us today, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Whew, we made it.
All right. Folks, I want to ask you if you would please subscribe, and when you do, hit that notification bell so that you know when we put out another video, which we will be doing tomorrow. Stop back and check us then. Thanks again.